You know, life can be pretty funny sometimes. Last week, when everyone was clamoring to go see Snow White so they could make a quick, easy hate video that everyone on YouTube just can't get enough of, well, to be fair, when you have this much blood in the water, I guess it's hard for parasites to resist. I, on the other hand, found myself with nothing that I really wanted to watch. So, as my default in these situations, I usually pick some random film to give it a chance, in hopes of maybe finding a diamond in the rough. Last week I ended up watching McVeigh, a film about the Oklahoma City bombing, but I scrapped that project halfway through making the review video because I just wasn't feeling it. Maybe I'll finish the video one day, I don't know. I just felt like I wasted my time. So, when once again I found myself this weekend with nothing I really wanted to go and see, I questioned on whether picking a random film and hoping for the best was really worth my time. But I stuck to my guns and did it anyways. And I am so glad that I did. Because I went to go see Death of a Unicorn, and it is the best written story I've seen so far this year. Which is absurd, because it's a goofy, dark horror comedy about murderous unicorns. What? Which really is more of a sad yet kind of funny commentary on how far industry standards of storytelling have fallen in the past 15 years. Because if you follow my videos, you know I really focus on narrative and the bare bones beginner basics of cohesiveness and consistency. Meaning, does your story make logical sense in the scenarios and world you created? You know, really low elementary writing 101 stuff here. And yet, these so-called professionals seem to have a hard time doing nowadays. And so I think Death of a Unicorn is a really good perspective cleanser when it comes to writing stories. In that, it doesn't matter how goofy or ridiculous your subject matter is, good writing is still good writing. And it doesn't matter how popular your IP is, or how many bells and whistles you attach to it, or even how ravenously your diehard fans will defend it. Bad writing will always be bad writing. And Death of a Unicorn is a well-written narrative with one or two minor problems that don't really affect the overarching story, some of which is due to technological limitations, which I will get into later. However, if you are a fan of schlocky 1980s or early 90s horror films, you will probably like this movie, because that's basically what it is. It's a concise, well-paced narrative with clearly defined character archetypes that actually stay consistent throughout the whole film. It has a clear beginning, middle, and end with emotional beats that never linger too long. All of this coming in on just slightly over 90 minutes long, which I appreciate, as the majority of stories out there do not deserve to be over 2 hours long. And even more impressively, this movie never lets the comedy aspect take away from the horror elements. I was surprised to find some genuinely terrifying moments in this film, and they do not shy away from showing some pretty gruesome, gory stuff. In the end, this movie clearly doesn't take itself too seriously, but it also doesn't use that as an excuse to have bad, lazy writing. Again, it really reminds me of a 1980s horror film, which I am always down for. So, for my highbrow critic score, I give Death of a Unicorn a solid 8 out of 10. And for my schmo score, the score for the average Joe Schmo, I give it a 9 out of 10. Now, this is where I explain my review scores and get a bit into spoiler territory. So, if you would like to see Death of a Unicorn spoiler-free, which I highly recommend, this is where we part ways. Thanks for showing up, and I want you to have a nice day. Now, as I mentioned before, there are many really good things about this movie. From the pacing, the acting, having a good balance of comedic, emotional, and horror beats. They did a really good job of being funny, but not letting the comedy fully train wreck their narrative, like current Marvel movies always do. And as I said, they really don't skimp out on the horror elements. I mean, you have scenes of people getting ripped in half or slowly disemboweled alive, on top of some very tense sneaking around cat and mouse scenes. You know, very Jurassic Park kitchen scene like. But for this video, I would really like to focus on one thing this film does exceptionally well. That is indirect characterization, i.e., how the writers give the audience information on who the character is, what their personality is like, and how they make them feel real. And this movie does a really good job of delivering that information organically, to the point where the audience may not even realize they're being given this information. For example, when we are introduced to Paul Rudd's character, who is the dad of Jenna Ortega's character, they're just waiting on a plane. His daughter is asleep and she slides over and rests her head on Rudd's shoulder. This visibly shocks him, but he is ultimately happy about it and rests his head on top of hers. While doing this, he accidentally drops some business papers that he was reading onto the floor, which introduces our first conflict for this character, because he clearly doesn't want to disturb his daughter's sleep, but he also desperately wants those business papers. He tries to get him with his feet and other things. It's not happening. So ultimately, he chooses to go for the business papers, causing his daughter's head to fall and hit the seat, waking her up. And there it is. In that little scene, the audience was given everything they need to know about the father's character, without them even realizing it. Because later on, you see how the father has become a workaholic in order to provide for his daughter that he loves, but he has become so obsessed with work, he has forgotten the original purpose and is now causing harm to his daughter by not being a father anymore. We got all of that characterization in a 1 to 2 minute scene without any dialogue or exposition. Because remember, this is a visual narrative. Don't tell the audience what the character is like. You have to show them. And I'm yelling right now because this is such a beginner level baby brain concept. And yet the vast majority of modern day writers can't seem to comprehend this. It's insane. That would be like a professional mechanic not understanding why an engine needs oil. Ridiculous. Remember, visual narratives, you have to show us, not tell us. Okay? Anyways, Death of a Unicorn does a great job of characterization. Within the first few minutes of meeting any character, we know exactly who they are and what behavior to expect from them. And then the writers continue to do a good job in keeping the characters consistent and believable throughout the entire narrative. Now, let's go through some of the bad things because this movie was far from perfect. 1, the ancient tapestry that just so happened to have all the answers about unicorns feels a little Deus Ex Machina-esque, you know? But it's not completely narrative breaking, so it's fine. Also, we need to talk about the CGI unicorns. Now, I did like the unicorns' overall design, and I like that they used practical effects when they could, but the CGI gets a little hokey at times. It seems like they may have used the entire budget for the ending scene, where they show the unicorns in broad daylight, and it looks fine, it's passable. It's just for some scenes in the middle of the movie, it's not great. Like, there are 2 fight scenes between unicorns and humans that really get confusing, because they clearly use some tricks to try and obscure the not-so-good CGI, like using camera blocking or seeing the unicorns through thermal vision. But by doing this, the fight scenes don't really make sense. You know, you'll have people being in one spot in one shot and then magically disappearing in the next, or people and unicorns just kind of teleporting around. It all just gets kind of confusing and really doesn't make sense. Again, I feel this may have been a budget issue, but still, you gotta account for those things. And lastly, they added an extra ending for no reason. Like, the movie clearly ends, and then they just tack on this extra 5-minute scene where the police show up, and it doesn't really do anything for the narrative, and it actually makes the ending much worse. So, I don't know why they added that, but there it is. All in all, Death of a Unicorn is a diamond in the rough that I think majority of general audiences are going to enjoy. It really is written like a classic 80s horror film. You know, a movie you can just put on, turn your brain off, and be entertained, while also being well written, showing that it doesn't matter how ridiculous your plot is. If you know how to do the basics well enough, any story can be good. Anyways, thanks for being here. I appreciate you, and I'll catch ya at the next one.